Dear students, we have discussed actual growth rate and warranted growth rate in the previous classes. Actual growth rate is the rate at which an economy is actually growing, whereas warranted growth rate is the desired or the required growth rate. And as we have discussed, macroeconomic equilibrium in a Harrod type economy requires constant rate of growth of income or output at warranted rate GW is equal to S by V. That is, if actual growth rate is equal to warranted growth rate, then the economy will be experiencing equilibrium growth rate. However, there is no particular reason to believe that an economy will grow at a warranted rate. There is no particular reason to believe that the actual growth rate will be equal to warranted growth rate, or the economy will be growing at a rate equal to warranted rate. This is because the actual growth rate G, that is equal to S by V, is the outcome of expectations, decisions and mistakes by a lot of different decision makers. So actual growth rate depends on the expectations, the decisions, mistakes of a lot of decision makers in the economy, producers, consumers, etc. So there is no reason to believe that the economy experiences a growth rate consistent with the warranted growth. Also, if GA is not equal to GW, that is, if actual growth rate is not equal to warranted growth rate, then actual capital stock is not equal to desired capital stock. Actual capital stock is not equal to desired capital stock of the entrepreneurs. So there will be divergence between actual capital stock or actual capital output ratio and desired capital output ratio. As an example, suppose that the economy was growing at a rate of 10% and it was equal to GW, the desired growth rate, for several periods. But entrepreneurs become pessimistic about expected increase in actual demand or aggregate demand in the current period. Entrepreneurs suddenly become pessimistic about aggregate demand. That is, they become suspicious about aggregate demand, or they expect a deficiency of aggregate demand in the current period. And if they exhibit such a pessimistic view about aggregate demand, then what they do is they will increase the level of output in the current period by less than 10%, so that they will invest a little small amount. They will reduce the level of investment. So, economy will move away from warranted growth rate. If the entrepreneurs become pessimistic about aggregate demand in the current period, then they will invest less than what is required to attain 10% growth rate. Then the economy will move away from warranted growth rate. And according to Harrod, such a temporary divergence from warranted growth is not self-correcting. A move away from warranted growth is not self-correcting. In fact, once increase in output falls below GW, if increase in output falls below GW, there will be forces in the economy which will push it even farther away from that rate. That is, if a growth rate of output falls below GW, there will be forces in the economy which will increase this divergence. The same is true if actual output is greater than warranted, or if actual growth is greater than warranted growth. So, if economy diverges from the warranted growth path, the desired growth path, then the economy will move away from the desired growth path over time. And this is given in the form of a definition. The definition is, because of the lack of self-correcting forces in the Harrod model of the economy, because of the lack of self-correcting forces in the Harrod model of the economy, warranted growth is said to be characterized by knife-edge instability. Warranted growth is said to be characterized by knife-edge instability. Knife-edge instability is, that is, warranted growth is characterized by knife-edge instability. So, in the Harrod model, there is knife-edge instability. The meaning is that if the economy move away from warranted growth path, the divergence will increase over time. There are no automatic self-correcting forces which will return the economy to the warranted growth path. So, warranted growth path is characterized by what is known as knife-edge instability. Now, let us see this knife-edge instability in a little more detail. Suppose that GA exceeds GW, that is, actual growth exceeds warranted growth, or delta Y by Y exceeds S by VR. Actual growth exceeds warranted growth, and can be written as delta Y by Y is equal to, S is the propensity to save, so S is equal to S by Y VR. S is small letter s, propensity to save is equal to Sy, so Sy by VR. So, delta Y by Y exceeds Sy by VR, and delta Y by 1 by VR is greater than Sy by VR divided by 1 by VR, dividing both sides with the 1 by VR. That will give us VR into delta Y greater than Sy. VR into delta Y greater than Sy. And we know that this VR into delta y that we have already derived in the context of warranted growth path, it is the desired investment. I is equal to, as we have discussed earlier, I is equal to V into delta y. And we can give the notation VR into delta y because it is the desired investment. So this is desired investment. VR into delta y is the desired investment and SY is savings. So we have desired investment exceeds savings. If actual growth exceeds desired growth, then desired investment exceeds savings, or I exceeds S. I is desired investment, not actual investment, exceeds savings. What does that mean? The meaning is that if actual growth exceeds warranted growth, entrepreneurs realize that the level of investment is not enough. The level of investment, the current level of investment is not enough. So, as a result, we can say that as desired investment exceeds savings, we can say that aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply. Aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply. And as aggregate demand exceeds aggregate supply, producers have a desire to increase output more rapidly, or producers realize that they are not investing sufficient amount, so they will invest more. In that case, so if output, that is output actual growth exceeds warranted growth, investors consider that actual increase in output is too low, so that they will increase output at a faster rate in the next period. And to increase output at a faster rate in the next period, they will give orders for additional equipments, additional capital, etc. As a result, GA further exceeds from GW. GA further exceeds from GW. So if actual growth exceeds desired growth, entrepreneurs realize that they are not making sufficient investment. So they will give orders for more capital goods, and as a result, actual growth will again increase, and the divergence between actual and warranted growth will increase over time. Now, we can depict the situation slightly differently, and we can say that GA exceeding GW can also be written as GA exceeding GW can also be written as S by V exceeding S by VR, because GA is equal to S by V, GW is equal to S by VR. Or we can say 1 by V less than 1 by VR. 1 by V less than 1 by V multiplying dividing both sides with S, 1 by V greater than 1 by VR, or V is less than VR. So GA exceeding GW means V or VR exceeding V, that is the desired capital output ratio exceeds actual capital output ratio. Desired capital output ratio exceeding actual capital output ratio. So if GA exceeds GW, one consequence is that desired investment is greater than actual savings, or aggregate demand is greater than aggregate supply. That is one case. A second case is actual capital output ratio falls short of desired capital output ratio. So actual capital output ratio falls short of desired capital output ratio. Entrepreneurs will give orders for additional capital equipments. Output will further increase. GA deviates farther away from GW in the next period. An alternative situation is GA. An alternative situation is GA less than GW. An alternative situation. GA is less than GW. That is delta Y by Y less than S by VR. Less than S by VR, or VR into delta Y less than SY. Or what we say is desired investment less than savings. If GA less than GW, actual growth is less than desired growth, then entrepreneurs will realize that they have made more investments. Desired investment is less than, they realize that there is an excess of savings over investment, or desired investment falls short of savings. And this is a signal to the producers that they have produced too much. In this case, we can also write that aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. They have produced too much. So what happens is, in the next period, as they have already produced too much, they will reduce the level of output in the next period. So if actual growth is less than warranted growth, again actual growth will move away from warranted growth, because as aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply, entrepreneurs will give less orders for new capital goods. Output will further decrease. Actual growth will again move away from what is known as warranted growth. And similarly, as we have shown here, if GA is less than GW, using the same, we can say that V exceeds VR. Actual capital output ratio exceeds desired capital output ratio. That means they have invested too much. So as a result, entrepreneurs will reduce the amount of investment in the periods to come. So as a result, there will be contraction of income, output, employment, etc., and economy will experience depression. So if GA exceeds GW, economy will experience periods of boom, and if GA less than GW, economy will experience depression and contraction. And there is no guarantee that economy will move along warranted growth path. Possibilities of continuous boom or depression is possible in a Harrod type economy. Let us see these cases in the form of a graph. Suppose that Y is taken here and time is here. And suppose also that the economy is like this. Up to T1, G is equal to GW. The rate of growth of income is such that GA is equal to GW up to T1. And in this case, this is GA and this is GW. GA is equal to, as I told you, it is delta Y by Y is equal to S by V. Delta y by y is equal to, delta y by y. And GW is equal to, again delta y by y is also equal to S by VR. Delta y by y is equal to S by VR. So after T1, GA falls below GW. As a result, over time, the divergence increases and actual growth move away from warranted growth. Actual growth move away from warranted growth. If GA falls short of GW after T1. Now consider another case, a second possibility. Up to T1, GA is equal to GW, and beyond that, GA is equal to S by V. This is GW is equal to S by VR, and we assume that up to T1, GA is equal to GW. Beyond that, GA exceeds GW. So it is greater than S by VR. GA, S by V, greater than S by VR, and GW is equal to S by VR is also equal to delta y by y. So if GA exceeds GW, that is the first case we have discussed, over time the divergence increases. If GA falls short of GW, again over time the divergence increases due to the factors discussed by X. So to conclude, deviations of actual rate of growth of a Harrod type economy from warranted rate S by VR, deviations of growth from GW here, far from being self-correcting, are cumulative in effect, and this problem is referred to as knife-edge property. That is, if the economy deviates from warranted growth path, the desired growth path, the growth which ensures full employment of capital or full capacity growth rate, another name of warranted growth, the deviations are not self-correcting. It is cumulative in effect. The deviations increases over time. And this problem is known as knife-edge property. This problem is known as knife-edge property. That is it.